The void between star systems wasn't silent. It was alive with whispers of data, electromagnetic ghosts, and the constant pulse of scanning systems. Commander Elena Rodriguez felt more at home here than anywhere else in the universe. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface of the Nighthawk, an experimental stealth interceptor that was less a spacecraft and more an extension of her own consciousness. 3 generations of military service ran in her blood. Her grandmother had fought in the resource wars of 2389, her mother in the Martian unification conflict of 2421. And now Elena carried a legacy of protection that burned deeper than any institutional memory. The neural link between her combat suit and the ship's systems meant every movement was intuitive, every decision processed at the speed of thought. Anomalous signal at Vector 247 Mark 33. Lieutenant Kai Chen's voice cut through the ship's ambient hum. His quantum-enhanced analysis systems were some of the most advanced in the Colonial Defense Force. Electromagnetic signature doesn't match any known pirate or commercial transponder. Rodriguez's augmented eyes, a standard enhancement for deep space commanders, scanned the surrounding asteroid field. The massive rock formations of the Epsilon Eridani system created a natural maze, perfect for hiding or ambushing. Her team of 6 was on a routine patrol, hunting down the increasing number of raiders that had been attacking isolated colonial outposts. "Zoom and enhance," she commanded. The ship's AI immediately complied, molecular resolution scanners piercing through the electromagnetic interference. What emerged was a nightmare beyond anything Rodriguez had encountered in her 15 years of service. A massive vessel, if it could be called a vessel, hung suspended among the asteroids. Its design defied conventional engineering. Organic and mechanical components seemed to merge in ways that violated everything humans understood about spacecraft construction. Tendrils of biometallic structures pulsed with an unsettling rhythm, like the breathing of a massive predator. "My God," Kai whispered, his professional composure momentarily shattered. Surrounding the vessel were thousands of stasis pods. Not military pods, not refugee transport units, but something far more disturbing. Each pod was sized for a child. Some human, many clearly from species humanity had only recently encountered in deep space exploration. "Run a full spectrum analysis," Rodriguez ordered, her voice steel wrapped in ice. The ship's systems began probing the derelict vessel. What they discovered turned Rodriguez's blood cold. The pods weren't abandoned. They were harvested. Each contained a child, suspended in a form of biological stasis that suggested advanced technological processing. Species markers indicated children from at least 17 different known civilizations. A single transmission burst suddenly erupted from the vessel. Most communication systems would have missed it, a microsecond pulse so compressed it was nearly invisible. But the Nighthawk's quantum communication array caught every fragment. Genetic harvest complete. Resource allocation optimal. Civilizational preservation protocol engage. Rodriguez's neural implants began running translation and contextual analysis. The message wasn't a distress signal. It was a report, a clinical, emotionless documentation of what could only be described as mass abduction. Lieutenant Chen's voice cracked. "Commander, those pods. There are thousands of them." Before Rodriguez could respond, movement detected from the alien vessel. Weapon systems began charging, not defensively, but with calculated predatory intent. Whatever this vessel was, it was preparing to destroy the evidence of its harvest. "Evasive pattern Delta," Rodriguez commanded. "Prepare quantum disruptors." The Nighthawk moved with impossible grace, a dance of technological perfection that pushed the limits of human engineering. Rodriguez's neural link allowed her to predict the alien vessel's targeting systems milliseconds before they could lock onto her ship. One shot. That's all she would need. The quantum disruptor fired, a concentrated burst of energy that was part physics, part computational warfare. It struck the alien vessel's weapon systems with surgical precision, rendering them inoperable without destroying the vessel itself. They would get answers. Whatever this was, Humanity would understand it. As the disabled vessel drifted among the asteroids, Rodriguez knew nothing would ever be the same. First contact had just become something far more complicated than any diplomatic scenario in human history. The real war was about to begin. The United Earth Council chamber fell silent as the holographic projection materialized. Unlike previous diplomatic encounters, which typically involved carefully choreographed displays of mutual respect, this transmission carried an aura of clinical detachment that sent chills through every human present. The Vexenar diplomatic entity was neither fully organic nor entirely mechanical. Its form shifted constantly, a living hologram that seemed to represent multiple consciousness streams simultaneously. When it spoke, the translation system struggled to capture the nuanced layers of meaning. Humanity, the entity began. Your species has reached the threshold of galactic integration. The civilizational preservation protocol is not a choice. It is a fundamental cosmic mechanism. Commander Rodriguez stood beside the primary diplomatic team, her combat suit a deliberate statement. She wasn't here as a military decoration, but as a living testament to human resilience. The neural data from the Nighthawks encounter was projected behind her. Thousands of children's stasis pods, suspended in a nightmare of technological harvest. Secretary General Dr. Imani Okoro, a veteran of multiple interstellar negotiations, leaned forward. "Explain the civilizational preservation protocol," she demanded, her voice calm, but laden with barely contained fury. The Vexenar projection shifted, displaying holographic representations of multiple alien species, each showing a complex genealogical timeline that abruptly terminated at certain points. Intelligent species face existential threats. Genetic diversity ensures survival. By collecting and processing young specimens, we maintain genetic repositories that can resurrect or rehabilitate species facing extinction. Rodriguez's augmented neural systems were processing every microsecond of the transmission. Something was off. The diplomatic language was precise, but underneath lay a system of logic that treated sentient beings as nothing more than biological data points. "You mean you kidnap children?" Rodriguez interjected, her voice cutting through the diplomatic veneer. "You harvest entire generations." The Vexenar did something unexpected. It laughed. Not an emotional response, but a calculated sonic output that simulated laughter. Kidnapping implies resistance. 63 documented galactic civilizations have already integrated into the protocol. Your resistance is statistically improbable. The holographic display shifted again. Now it showed a clinical breakdown. Percentages of children collected from various species. 17 civilizations were listed as fully processed, 26 as partial compliance. The rest marked as resistance candidates. Secretary Okoro's voice was steel. "We will not surrender our children." The Vexenar's response was immediate and chilling. "Then you choose species extinction. The protocol offers two paths: controlled genetic preservation or complete biological termination. Humanity has 72 standard galactic cycles to comply." What followed was not a traditional negotiation, but a psychological warfare session that would define humanity's first major interstellar confrontation. Rodriguez began systematically dismantling the Vexenar's communication strategy. Her neural implants, connected to the most advanced linguistic and psychological analysis systems, started picking apart the aliens' transmission at a molecular level. "Your entire argument is predicated on a fundamental misunderstanding of biological survival," she said, her words translated and analyzed in real time. "Genetic preservation isn't about collecting specimens. It's about nurturing potential, about cultural continuity." The Vexenar's projection flickered, a micro-reaction that suggested their communication systems were struggling to process her response. Dr. Helena Chen, the Council's synapsychological expert, joined the assault. "Your protocol doesn't preserve civilizations. It sterilizes them. Culture isn't genetic material. It's lived experience, transmitted through generations, through stories, through connections. Each human in the chamber represented a different approach to resistance: military precision, diplomatic strategy, psychological warfare, technological innovation, but they were unified by one unbreakable principle. The children were not a resource. They were the future. The Vexenar diplomatic entity made one final transmission, a clinical ultimatum: surrender 40% of children under 16 or face planetary sterilization. The response from humanity was unanimous and instantaneous. No. The negotiation was over. The real conflict was about to begin. The transformation began in the first 72 hours after the Vexenar ultimatum. Tokyo's educational district became a blueprint for global resistance. Entire school complexes were retrofitted into multi-layered defense systems within hours. Underground facilities extended 6 levels deep, each level a marvel of engineering that could become an instant sanctuary. Quantum encrypted communications turned every classroom into a potential command center. In Sao Paulo, Dr. Mariana Costa stood before a hastily assembled team of civilian strategists, engineers, and child development experts. The global lottery for the Child Protection Task Force had selected individuals from every conceivable background: teachers, engineers, psychologists, community leaders. "We are not just preparing for a war," Costa declared, her holographic presentation displaying real-time global preparedness metrics. "We are redefining what it means to be a civilization." The presentation was brutal in its honesty. Historical data showed how other species had failed, how they had capitulated, surrendering their future in the face of overwhelming technological superiority. Humanity would be different. Every major city became a living, breathing defensive organism. In New York, construction drones worked in hypersynchronization, building underground complexes that could house entire communities. The global manufacturing base had been completely repurposed. Automotive plants now produced advanced child protection technologies. Pharmaceutical companies developed genetic stabilization treatments. Silicon Valley's entire ecosystem transformed into a research network focused on one singular goal: protecting the next generation. The Quantum Sanctuary Network went online 48 hours after the Vexenar transmission. It was more than a defense system. It was a radical reimagining of human security. Every child would have a quantum-encrypted biosignature. The moment any threat was detected, teleportation systems would activate, moving children to secure zones instantaneously. Commander Rodriguez found herself at the center of this global transformation. Her testimony before the United Nations Emergency Council became a rallying cry that would be remembered for generations. "They think children are a resource," she said, her voice carrying the weight of the Nighthawk's discovery. "We know children are the very definition of human potential." The global response defied every previous model of human organization. National boundaries dissolved. Resources were redistributed with a speed and efficiency that shocked economic analysts. Parents who had never held a weapon began intensive training programs. Schools transformed into hybrid educational and defensive facilities. In Melbourne, a group of retired engineers developed the first prototype of what would become known as the Guardian Cradle, a personal force field system designed specifically to protect children. In Lagos, a network of community centers became distributed intelligence hubs, each one capable of coordinating local defense and evacuation strategies. The lottery for the Child Protection Task Force became a global phenomenon. Millions applied for a chance to be part of humanity's most critical defensive initiative. The selection process was rigorous, not just testing technical skills, but emotional resilience, creative problem-solving, and an unwavering commitment to protecting the future. Dr. Costa's team developed the first comprehensive civilizational continuity protocol. It wasn't just a military strategy. It was a holistic approach to preserving human culture, knowledge, and potential. Every child would be more than a protected individual. They would be a living repository of human experience. Genetic databases were secured. Cultural archives were duplicated and distributed across quantum-encrypted networks. Multiple planetary backup systems were established. If the worst happened, humanity's essence would survive. 24 hours before the Vexnar's initial deadline, a global broadcast went out. Not a message of fear, but of absolute determination. Every human, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, understood the stakes. This was more than a war. This was a fundamental statement about the value of future generations. The Vexnar had made a fundamental miscalculation. They believed they were facing a species. They were about to encounter a civilization that would redefine the very meaning of survival. The countdown to confrontation had begun. Dr. Aisha Kapoor's quantum computing lab looked nothing like a traditional research facility. Suspended in the zero-gravity environment of Lunar Research Station Alpha, holographic interfaces danced around her like living entities. Each projection represented a different layer of the Mirror Protocol, the most ambitious artificial intelligence system ever conceived. "We're not just building a defense system," she muttered to her lead assistant, Dr. Marcus Wong. "We're creating a predictive consciousness." The Mirror Protocol was more than an AI. It was a living, adaptive system designed to do the impossible, predict and neutralize threats before they could even be conceived. Traditional military AI focused on reaction. This system was about anticipation, about understanding the fundamental logic of threat generation. Alongside her, a team of the world's most brilliant minds worked in hypersynchronization. Genetic engineers, quantum physicists, neural network specialists, and xenobiological experts, all united by a single purpose. In the adjacent chamber, the first trials of the Guardian strain were underway. It wasn't a traditional genetic modification, but a quantum neural enhancement that would fundamentally alter human protective instincts. Early simulations were beyond promising. They were revolutionary. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now serving as the primary military liaison to the research team, watched the initial test subjects with intense concentration. Her neural implants interfaced directly with the research systems, collecting every microscopic detail of the modifications. The first test subject, Captain Michael Chen, stood in a holographic combat simulation. Standard baseline tests showed typical human protective responses. Then the Guardian strain activated. The transformation was instantaneous and shocking. Chen's neural pathways restructured in real time. Threat assessment algorithms that normally took milliseconds now processed in microseconds. But more importantly, the emotional response was unprecedented. The simulation introduced multiple threat scenarios, some targeting Chen directly, others targeting children in nearby zones. The difference was stark. When personal threats were introduced, Chen's response was efficient but measured. When child protection scenarios emerged, his entire physiological and psychological response escalated exponentially. Reaction times improved by 327%. Tactical decision-making became almost precognitive. But more than the technical improvements, something fundamentally human emerged, an almost supernatural level of protective instinct. "It's not just enhancement," Dr. Kapoor explained, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and profound wonder. "We're amplifying the most fundamental human characteristic, our capacity to protect our future." The Mirror Protocol began its most complex simulation yet. Millions of potential Vexnar attack scenarios were processed simultaneously. Where traditional military systems would create linear response strategies, this system did something entirely different. It learned. Each potential scenario was not just analyzed, but deeply understood. The AI began to predict not just tactical movements, but the psychological motivations behind them. It was developing an understanding of the Vexnar that went beyond data. It was developing a form of alien empathy. Simultaneously, the quantum sanctuary network expanded. Every human child would now have a quantum-encrypted biosignature that could be instantly tracked, protected, and, if necessary, teleported to safety. The network was more than a defense system. It was a living, breathing protective organism. Dr. Wong demonstrated a prototype personal shield generator. "Traditional force fields block physical threats," he explained. "Ours will do something more. It doesn't just protect, It adapts, learns, predicts. The device looked deceptively simple, a small medallion that could be worn by children or guardians. But its internal systems were a marvel of quantum engineering, capable of detecting threats across multiple dimensional spectrums, of creating instantaneous escape routes that didn't just move a child, but erased their quantum signature entirely. Rodriguez understood the deeper implications. This wasn't just technology. This was humanity's fundamental response to an existential threat, to create systems that didn't just defend, but fundamentally reimagine the concept of protection. "We're not just preparing for war," she said to the assembled team. "We're redefining what it means to be protected." The Vexnar thought they understood technological superiority. They were about to learn the difference between technology and true innovation. Humanity was ready. The battle for New Singapore began before the first shot was fired. Commander Elena Rodriguez watched from the command center as the quantum sanctuary network came alive. Millions of quantum-encrypted signals danced across holographic displays, each representing a child, a potential target, a life to be protected. The Vexnar fleet emerged from subspace with terrifying suddenness. 17 massive vessels, each a nightmare of biomechanical engineering, surrounded the orbital defense perimeter of New Singapore's colony. Their weapon systems were unlike anything humanity had encountered, living technologies that seemed to breathe and pulse with predatory intelligence. "Mirror protocol active," Dr. Aisha Kapoor's voice cut through the command center's tension. "Predictive systems are mapping potential attack vectors." What the Vexnar didn't understand was that this wasn't going to be a traditional space battle. Every human system was now an interconnected, adaptive organism. The Guardian strain modifications meant that every soldier, every pilot, every defender was operating at a level of synchronization that defied conventional military doctrine. Captain Michael Chen led the first response wing. His neural augmentations, enhanced by the Guardian strain, allowed him to process tactical information at speeds that would have been impossible months ago. Where traditional pilots made decisions, Chen's mind was a living, breathing combat algorithm. The first wave of Vexnar bioweapons launched, organic projectiles that could adapt their molecular structure mid-flight, designed to penetrate traditional defense systems. But the quantum sanctuary network was already 3 steps ahead. Quantum shields flickered to life, not just blocking the incoming threat, but actively dismantling its molecular structure. Rodriguez's neural link with the Mirror protocol gave her a perspective no commander had ever possessed. She wasn't just commanding. She was experiencing the battle from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each Vexnar attack strategy was predicted, understood, and neutralized before it could fully form. "They're attempting a genetic harvesting vector on the southern orbital platform," she called out. The command team watched in real time as the incoming threat was not just blocked, but turned back on itself. The Vexnar's own bioweapons were redirected, their adaptive capabilities used against them. In the zero-gravity habitats of New Singapore's orbital colonies, something extraordinary was happening. Parents who had undergone intensive training became living weapons. The Guardian strain wasn't just a military modification. It was a fundamental reimagining of human protective instinct. A Vexnar boarding attempt on one of the orbital platforms met with a response they could never have anticipated. Civilian engineers, teachers, medical professionals, each had been prepared. Each was connected to the broader defensive network. They didn't just resist. They counterattacked with a level of coordinated fury that defied all alien understanding. Captain Chen's fighter wing performed maneuvers that pushed the boundaries of human-machine interface. Each pilot was more than a human controlling a machine. They were a living, breathing part of a larger defensive consciousness. The Mirror protocol allowed them to move as a single organism, predicting and countering Vexnar tactical formations before they could fully deploy. Dr. Kapoor's systems were doing something unprecedented. They weren't just defending, they were learning. Each Vexnar attack strategy was immediately analyzed, understood, and integrated into the defensive network. What would have taken months of traditional military analysis was now happening in microseconds. The orbital battle became a dance of impossible complexity. Quantum shields transformed. Defensive systems became offensive weapons. The very fabric of space around New Singapore became a weapon of human innovation. 3 hours into the conflict, the Vexnar realized something fundamental. They were no longer fighting a military. They were confronting a living, adaptive civilization. 12 Vexnar vessels were destroyed. The remaining 5 retreated, their biomechanical structures damaged in ways they couldn't comprehend. Not a single human child was lost. Not one. Rodriguez watched the retreating vessels, understanding that this was more than a battle. This was a statement. Humanity would protect its future, at any cost. The first strike was complete. The real war was just beginning. The interrogation chamber was unlike any the Vexnar had ever encountered. Dr. Helena Chen stood before the captured Vexnar soldier, a being that defied traditional biological classification. Part organic, part mechanical, entirely alien. Traditional interrogation techniques would be useless. Humanity had something far more powerful. "We're going to show you something," she said, her voice calm, almost gentle. The holographic system activated. Not with military data, not with strategic information, but with something far more complex. A fully immersive experience of human family life. The first projection was simple. A mother comforting a crying child after a nightmare. But it was more than just an image. The holographic system was designed by the world's leading xenopsychologists, neural network experts, and emotional intelligence specialists. It didn't just show an experience. It transmitted the emotional resonance. The Vexnar soldier experienced something impossible. The pure, unconditional love between a parent and child. Not as a concept, but as a lived experience. Every neural pathway, every biochemical response was laid bare. In the observation room, Commander Rodriguez watched with Dr. Kapoor. The AI systems were recording every microscopic reaction. "They've never encountered this," Kapoor muttered. "Their entire civilization is based on biological optimization. They see children as resources, not as individual beings with inherent value." The holographic experience continued. Birthdays, first steps, moments of teaching, of learning, of pure, unfiltered human connection. Each moment was a weapon more powerful than any physical technology. The Vexnar soldier's biomechanical systems began to destabilize. Its neural network, designed for clinical assessment and resource optimization, couldn't process the emotional complexity. Tears formed. Not human tears, but something equivalent, a biological response to an emotional experience it had never conceived possible. Across multiple detention facilities, the same process was happening. Captured Vexnar soldiers were experiencing humanity's most profound emotional experiences, not as propaganda, but as pure, unfiltered connection. Dr. Chen's team had discovered something extraordinary. The Vexnar weren't just a militaristic species. They were a civilization that had evolved to view biological potential as a mathematical equation. Children were potential genetic resources, not individual beings with hopes, dreams, potential. "We're not just breaking their military strategy," Dr. Chen explained to Rodriguez. "We're shattering their entire philosophical understanding of existence." In another facility, a different approach was being tested. A group of children, carefully prepared and protected, were brought near the detention areas, not as a threat, but as a living demonstration of human potential. 8-year-old Maya Rodriguez, the commander's daughter, sat drawing pictures. Her drawings weren't just art. They were a complex neural-linked communication. Each stroke contained not just visual information, but emotional resonance, potential, imagination. The Vexnar observers couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. A child wasn't a resource to be cataloged. A child was a universe of potential, of imagination, of unlimited possibility. Across multiple detention centers, something unprecedented began to happen. Vexnar soldiers started to break down. Not physically, but philosophically. Their entire understanding of biological optimization was being dismantled. Some requested asylum. Others simply shut down, their biomechanical systems unable to process the emotional complexity they had encountered. They thought they understood genetic preservation, Rodriguez said, watching the complex data streams. They're learning the difference between collecting genetic material and truly understanding life. The psychological warfare had a name within human strategic circles: Operation Empathy Cascade. It wasn't about defeating an enemy. It was about fundamentally changing their understanding of existence. By showing the Vexnar what it truly meant to protect, to love, to see potential in its purest form, humanity was doing something far more profound than winning a war. They were teaching an alien civilization the true meaning of life. The stealth ship Prometheus cut through quantum-folded space like a whisper. Commander Elena Rodriguez knew this mission was beyond any standard military operation. This was a surgical strike into the very core of Vexnar civilization, a rescue mission that would redefine interstellar conflict. Her team was carefully selected, not just for military prowess, but for something far more complex. Each member had undergone advanced psychological and genetic modifications that went beyond traditional special operations training. Lieutenant Kai Chen, the mission's quantum navigation specialist, interfaced directly with the ship's mirror protocol system. His neural implants created a living map of potential threats, predicting and avoiding detection with impossible precision. Beside him, Dr. Helena Chen, no relation, but equally critical to the mission, prepared the most advanced xenobiological extraction protocols ever conceived. The Vexnar processing facility wasn't a military installation. It was something far more terrifying. A massive biomechanical structure that processed children from multiple species as if they were nothing more than genetic raw materials. Orbital scans revealed the true horror: millions of stasis pods, each containing a child from a different civilization. "We're not just rescuing," Rodriguez communicated to her team. "We're dismantling an entire system of generational trauma." The ship's quantum camouflage was more than traditional stealth technology. Developed by Dr. Aisha Kapoor, it didn't just hide the vessel. It actively manipulated the quantum fabric of space, making the Prometheus essentially invisible to Vexnar detection systems. As they approached, the true scale of the facility became apparent. Millions of stasis pods, arranged in a complex geometric pattern that defied traditional understanding of biological storage. Each pod was a testament to the Vexnar's clinical approach to life. Children reduced to genetic potential, stripped of individual identity. The first phase of the infiltration was purely technological. The Mirror Protocol began its most complex hack in human history. It didn't just penetrate Vexnar systems, it began to rewrite them from the inside out. Defensive protocols were turned into access points. Security systems became pathways. Dr. Helena Chen's xenobiological extraction protocols were revolutionary. Each stasis pod required a unique combination of quantum frequency, genetic restoration, and psychological reconstruction. This wasn't just about physical rescue. It was about preserving the fundamental essence of each child. Lieutenant Chen's voice cut through the tension. "Quantum corridors are forming. We have a 97.3% safe extraction window." The rescue began. Millions of children, some human, many from species humanity had never encountered, began to be transported. The quantum teleportation system was designed to be more than a simple transport. It restored genetic integrity, began preliminary psychological healing, and created quantum-encrypted protective signatures. Rodriguez moved through the facility with a team that was part special forces, part rescue workers, part psychological rehabilitation specialists. The Guardian strain modifications meant they could sense threats with impossible precision, but also protect with a level of empathy that defied traditional military doctrine. In one section, they discovered something unexpected: Vexnar genetic archives that contained the biological history of dozens of species. It wasn't just a collection. It was a living museum of genetic potential, stripped of cultural context. Dr. Helena Chen realized something profound. The Vexnar didn't just collect children. They were trying to preserve something in the most clinical, most inhuman way possible. The broadcast began automatically. As each child was rescued, their extraction was transmitted across every communication channel in known space. It wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a statement. Humanity was drawing a line. No civilization would ever again treat children as resources. As the last child was extracted, Rodriguez activated the final protocol. The entire Vexnar facility began to disassemble, not through destruction, but through a quantum-level reconfiguration that would render it completely inoperable. The Prometheus disappeared into quantum space, carrying millions of rescued children. The real war was about to enter its final phase. The Interstellar Reconciliation Conference was unlike any diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Held on the restored colony world of New Hope, a planet rebuilt by rescued children from multiple species, the conference represented more than a diplomatic resolution. It was a fundamental reimagining of civilizational relationships. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the massive holographic chamber. Behind her, a living mosaic of children from rescued species moved and played, a visual representation of what had been saved. Each child wore a quantum-encrypted medallion, a symbol of their protected status. The representatives of 63 alien civilizations watched in stunned silence. Dr. Helena Chen presented the comprehensive analysis of the Vexnar system. It wasn't just a military report. It was a profound exploration of how a civilization could become so detached from the concept of individual life. The holographic displays showed the intricate web of genetic harvesting, the clinical reduction of children to mere biological potential. What we discovered, she explained, her voice carrying across multiple translation systems, was not just a military threat. It was a fundamental philosophical failure. The rescued children were more than survivors. They were living proof of human intervention. Quantum psychological restoration protocols had not just healed their physical and mental traumas, they had created a new model of interspecies healing. Lieutenant Kai Chen revealed the most shocking discovery. The Vexnar's genetic archive wasn't just a collection. It was a desperate attempt to preserve potential in the most clinical way possible. A civilization so afraid of loss that it had forgotten the meaning of life itself. Rodriguez activated the final presentation. The holographic display showed the fundamental transformation of Vexnar technology. Instead of a weapon of harvesting, their advanced biomechanical systems were being repurposed into the most comprehensive child protection network in galactic history. The Warrior's Pledge is more than a human concept, she declared. It's a universal principle. The Interstellar Child Protection Accord was drafted. Its principles were revolutionary. No species shall consider children as resources. Genetic and cultural preservation must prioritize individual potential. Quantum-encrypted protection systems will be shared across all signatories. Psychological restoration becomes a fundamental galactic right. Cultural continuity is defined by lived experience, not genetic material. The most remarkable aspect was the implementation. The rescued children became the primary architects of the new accord. Children from human colonies worked alongside children from species humanity had never previously encountered. In the reconstruction zones, something extraordinary was happening. The advanced Vexnar biomechanical technologies, once used for harvesting, were being transformed. Quantum healing centers, advanced educational networks, psychological restoration facilities. Dr. Aisha Kapoor's team made a breakthrough that would define the next era of galactic civilization. The Mirror Protocol was adapted into a universal empathy translation system. For the first time, different species could truly understand each other's emotional experiences. The children played a crucial role. Their quantum-linked experiences created a new form of interspecies communication. Trauma became a bridge of understanding rather than a barrier. Rodriguez understood the deeper meaning. This wasn't just about defeating an enemy. This was about creating a new model of civilization. The final session of the conference saw an unprecedented moment. The representatives of 63 civilizations stood together, with children from multiple species at the center of the chamber. The warrior's pledge had become more than a human concept. It was now a universal principle. "We protect potential," Rodriguez said, "not as a military strategy, but as the fundamental definition of civilization itself." The rescued children, humans, and beings from species humanity had never known existed, stood together. Each wore the quantum-encrypted medallion. Each represented a future that had been saved. The conference wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Humanity had entered the galactic stage not as conquerors, but as protectors. The real journey was just beginning.